But nothing had ever stopped the building the way this did. A child's screaming echoed off 40 feet of Italian marble while the most powerful woman in the city stood helpless. It was not a tantrum. Anyone who understood what they were looking at would have known immediately that it was not a tantrum. The boy lay on the cold marble floor, his small body rigid, his hands slapping the stone in a rhythm that was not random. 4 beats, pause, 4 beats, pause. Over and over. His eyes were not squeezed shut in anger. They were wide open, fixed on something above him, and whatever he saw there had pulled him so far inside himself that nothing on the outside could reach him. Vivian Cole stood 6 feet away in a gray suit that cost more than most people's cars, and her face was the face of someone watching a train derail in slow motion. And right now, none of that meant anything. 40 minutes, she said, and her voice came out strange, like she was hearing it from somewhere else. It's been 40 minutes. The boy's own mother had tried kneeling on that cold marble floor and saying his name in the voice that had soothed him since infancy, and Eli Cole had not looked at her. He had not looked at any of them. He just kept slapping the stone in that relentless rhythm, 4 beats and a pause, his small hands going red against the marble, and the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like the building itself was getting a headache. Vivian turned to her assistant. Claire had worked for her for 11 years and had never once seen her boss look like this. Put out a reward, Vivian said. $750,000. For anyone who can help him. Right now. Do it. Claire's fingers were already on her phone. How do you want me to? However you need to. I don't care. Just find someone who knows what they're doing. The crowd in the lobby had grown to maybe 60 people. Executives, assistants, security guards, delivery drivers who had been passing through and stopped to stare. They formed a loose semicircle around the scene, keeping their distance the way people do when they're watching something they don't understand and are secretly grateful it's not happening to them. Their phones were out. Some of them were recording. Vivian Cole did not tell them to stop, and that alone told everyone who knew her that something had broken inside the woman who never broke. Marcus Williams stood at the edge of that crowd in his gray maintenance uniform, a toolbox in his left hand, and watched. He had worked the morning shift at Cole Enterprises for 8 years, and in that time he had learned one thing above all else: people like Vivian Cole did not see people like him. He was part of the building's infrastructure, like the plumbing or the electrical system. You noticed him only when something went wrong, and even then, you looked past him while you complained. He had made his peace with that a long time ago. It was easier to do his job when no one was watching. The lobby filled up between 8 o'clock and 8:30, thinned out by 9 o'clock, and stayed quiet until the lunch crowds pushed through the glass doors again. He knew which elevator made a grinding sound on the way to the 14th floor. He knew which bathroom on the 3rd floor had a slow drain. He knew that the 4th fluorescent light from the left column in the atrium had been flickering for 2 weeks because he had filed the maintenance request on a Tuesday and no one had approved it yet. He knew the building the way a sailor knows the sea, not by thinking about it, but by feeling it underfoot. And right now, he was watching something that no one else in that lobby could see. The boy's hands hit the marble. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. Marcus's eyes moved from the boy's face to the ceiling, tracking the angle of that fixed stare, and he found it. The flickering light. The 4th fluorescent from the left column. The one he had filed the request for. 4 beats. 1 for each flicker. Marcus's right hand went to the pocket of his jacket, and his fingers found the small blue toy car he kept there. It was no bigger than a matchbox, a 1967 Mustang fastback with the rear right wheel slightly bent from the time Noah had dropped it down the stairs. Noah had been 14 when the drunk driver ran the red light on Mercer Street, and that was 6 years ago now, and Marcus still carried the car everywhere. It was smooth from years of his thumb rubbing the roof while he thought. Noah had been like this boy. Not exactly like him, but close enough. The same difficulty with words when the world got too loud. The same way of retreating inside himself when the sensory input became too much to process. And Noah had done the same thing with patterns. Rhythms. Signals. He would knock on the kitchen table in sequences that seemed random until you understood what he was trying to tell you. The ceiling fan was too fast. The refrigerator hum was too loud. The light was flickering and no one else noticed, but it was driving him crazy. Marcus had learned to read those signals. It had taken him years, but he had learned. The boy on the floor was not having a breakdown. He was sending a distress call, and the only person in the entire 40-foot atrium who could decode it was a 58-year-old maintenance man with a dead son's toy car in his pocket and 2 weeks of waiting for someone to change a light bulb. Marcus tightened his grip on the toolbox. He stepped forward. "Bong den," he whispered, and then caught himself, shaking his head. "The light. He's talking about the light." No one heard him. Marcus stepped out of the crowd and the first thing that hit him was the silence. Not the real silence. Eli was still screaming, his small body rigid on the marble floor, his fists pounding that same 4-beat rhythm against stone that had to be bruising his knuckles by now, but the silence of everyone else. Marcus didn't look at any of them. He looked at the boy. "Back up," he said, and his voice came out low and even, the way he used to talk to Noah when the world got too loud and words became weapons. "All of you. At least 5 yards. 5 yards." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Something in the way he said it, something in the stillness of his shoulders and the deliberate way he set down his toolbox on the marble floor, made Curtis the security guard take a step back. Then another. "He needs you to back up." Marcus turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. 5 yards. Now. And then he did something that made the entire lobby go quiet in a different way. He sat down. Right there on the marble floor, 4 feet from Eli, close enough to be present but far enough to give the boy space. Eli's fists hit the floor. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. Marcus raised his right hand and brought it down on the marble. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. The screaming didn't stop, but something shifted. A flicker. The smallest hesitation in the rhythm, like a record player catching on a scratch before continuing. Eli didn't look at him, not yet, but his fists paused for half a beat longer than usual before resuming their desperate message. Marcus kept his hand on the floor, palm flat against the cold stone, and he spoke the way he used to speak to Noah when Noah was 9 years old and the world was too much. Short sentences. No questions. Just presence. "I know," he said. "That light's been driving me crazy too. 2 weeks now. Flickering like that." Behind him, Vivian Cole looked up at the ceiling. Her eyes tracked across the atrium, past the glass walls and the modern art and the executive elevator that went straight to the penthouse office, and she found it. The 4th fluorescent light from the left column. It was flickering. Barely perceptible, a stutter so slight that you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. Unless you were the kind of person who felt the world differently than everyone else. "I filed the maintenance request on a Tuesday," Marcus continued, his voice as calm as if he were discussing the weather. "Still waiting on approval. You know how it is. Paperwork." Eli's fists hit the marble. 4 beats. Pause. "Every morning you walk through this lobby," Marcus said. 8 years I've been watching you walk through this lobby. You always look up at that light. First thing. Before you look at the elevator or the people or anything else. You look up at that light and you wait for it to flicker. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. And every morning they hand you candy. They give you an iPad. They try to distract you. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Nobody ever asked you what you wanted. Nobody ever sat down on the floor with you and just listened. Dr. Sandra Price opened her mouth. Vivian Cole put a hand on her arm and shook her head. Something was happening in the atrium of Cole Enterprises that none of their training had prepared them for, and the most powerful woman in the city had enough instinct left to know when to shut up and watch. Marcus reached into the pocket of his jacket. His fingers found the small blue Mustang, smooth from years of his thumb rubbing the roof. He didn't pull it out. He just held it, grounding himself in the weight of it, in the memory of a boy who had taught him more about communication than any textbook or expert ever could. I had a son, Marcus said, and his voice dropped so low that only Eli could have heard him, if Eli was listening. His name was Noah. He was like you. Not exactly like you, nobody's exactly like anybody, but close enough. He used to knock on the kitchen table in rhythms like that. Drove his teachers crazy. They said he was acting out. They said he needed medication. They said a lot of things. Eli's fists hit the marble. The rhythm was slowing now. The pauses between sets were getting longer. They never asked him what he was trying to say. Marcus's thumb traced the roof of the toy car in his pocket. Took me years to figure it out. Years of sitting on the floor with him, just like this, waiting for him to trust me enough to let me in. And you know what I learned? The screaming had stopped. Eli's fists were still against the marble, his small chest heaving, his face still turned away from Marcus. But he was listening. The whole lobby was listening. 40 people in a 40-foot atrium, and the only sound was the hum of the building and the distant traffic and the faint, almost inaudible buzz of a flickering fluorescent light. I learned that children like my Noah, children like you, you're not misbehaving. You're not broken. You're not something to be fixed. Marcus's voice cracked, just slightly, just for a moment, before he steadied it. You're speaking a language that the rest of us forgot how to understand. And instead of learning it, we just keep trying to make you speak ours. Vivian Cole's hand went to her mouth. She was trembling. In 47 years of boardrooms and hostile takeovers and corporate warfare, she had never once sat on the floor with her son. She had never once asked him what he wanted. Marcus reached into the silence and said the only word that mattered. Noah. Eli's fist stopped. The marble floor went still. And then, very slowly, Eli turned his head. He looked at Marcus. Not past him, not through him, not at the flickering light that had been tormenting him for God knew how long, at Marcus. Then Eli raised his hand. Not to hit. Not to pound the floor. He raised his hand and pointed one small finger straight up at the ceiling, at the fluorescent light that had been flickering for 8 years. Marcus nodded. Yeah. That. We're gonna fix that tomorrow. And something passed between them that didn't need words. It was the look of two people who had been screaming into the void and finally heard an answer. Vivian Cole broke. Not quietly. Not with the kind of controlled, elegant tears that powerful women were supposed to cry in public. She broke the way a dam breaks, all at once, without warning, without any concern for who was watching. Her knees hit the marble floor beside her son and she gathered Eli into her arms, and she sobbed. Not for the board members. Not for the employees. Not for the image she had spent 47 years building. She sobbed because she had almost lost him, because she had never really had him, because a stranger in a maintenance uniform had done in 40 minutes what she had failed to do in 7 years. Eli let her hold him. He didn't hug her back, not yet, that would take time, that would take trust that hadn't been built, but he let her hold him, and that was more than he had given her in years. Marcus stood up. His knees cracked. He was 43 years old and he'd been sitting on a marble floor for the better part of an hour and his body was reminding him that he was not as young as he used to be. He brushed off his uniform, adjusted his jacket, and began walking toward the maintenance door at the back of the lobby. He didn't look back. He didn't wait to be thanked. He had done what he came to do, what he had been trained to do by 8 years of loving a boy who spoke a language no one else bothered to learn, and now he was going back to his cart and his cleaning supplies and the anonymity he had worn like armor since the day they buried Noah. Wait. Vivian's voice stopped him. It was hoarse from crying, stripped of the commanding tone that usually made executives jump and lawyers scramble. She was still on her knees, still holding her son, but her eyes were on Marcus. Wait, she said again. Please. Marcus turned. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, one hand on the door, and waited. Vivian reached into her jacket, the same jacket that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month, and pulled out a checkbook. Her hands were shaking. She wrote quickly, tore the check out, and held it up. From across the lobby, Marcus could see the number. $750,000. For everything, Vivian said. For what you did. For what you gave us. Marcus looked at the check. He looked at Eli, still curled against his mother's chest, still watching him with those dark eyes that understood more than anyone gave him credit for. He looked at the flickering fluorescent light overhead. He thought about Noah. He thought about the years of sitting on the floor, the years of learning a language no textbook could teach, the years of watching other parents struggle through the same darkness with no one to show them the way. He didn't take the check. Keep it, he said. But use it different. Vivian blinked. What do you mean? Don't give it to me. I don't want your money. Marcus's voice was steady now, steadier than it had been all afternoon. Use it to open a center. Not a clinic. We got enough clinics with degrees on the wall and doctors who spend 15 minutes with your kid before they write a prescription. I'm talking about a place where parents like me, parents who've been through the 3 in the morning meltdowns and the silent dinners and the years of fighting with school systems and doctors who don't listen, a place where those parents can teach the families who just got their diagnosis. Vivian stared at him. The check was still in her hand, still extended toward him like an offering. A center, she repeated. Call it the Noah Williams Center. Marcus's voice cracked on the name, just slightly, just for a moment. No degrees on the walls. No intake forms. Just people who've lived it, sitting in a circle, teaching other people how to live it too. Vivian Cole, who had built an empire on negotiations and contracts and leverage, looked at the maintenance man who had just refused $750,000, and she realized she had nothing to offer him that he wanted. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for recognition. He was asking her to build something that would outlast both of them. Okay, she said. Okay. Marcus nodded once, pushed open the maintenance door, and disappeared into the back hallway. The door swung shut behind him with a soft click. 6 months later, the Noah Williams Center opened its doors 12 blocks from Cole Enterprises. There were no diplomas on the walls. No waiting rooms with magazines from 3 years ago. No intake forms asking for insurance information and medical history before anyone would even look at your child. The expertise sat in the chairs, parents who had logged thousands of hours on the floor with their own children, who had learned to listen to the rhythms and the silences and the things that didn't look like communication but were.